information about how you can help Mumia Abu-Jamal and other political prisoners. Night Watchman out.
Stay tuned to We Act Radio, Washington, D.C.'s only independent radio station. Catch us online at weactradio.com.
They were saying when they think you cannot hear. If you understood what they do, if for you it was so clear. If you knew they shut down the factory in an economic ruse. If you could kiss the cheek of the child in the sweatshop that made your shoes. Every time we went to war to fight our evil foes, they told you we were really fighting for the good of CEOs. If you could feel the hunger of the many, see the riches of the few. If they told it like it is, what if you knew?
What if you knew?
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese on an exciting Earth Day.
Absolutely.
I have an Earth Day shirt on.
Yes, you did. I wore green.
My Earth Day shirt's getting old.
Been a lot of Earth Days.
Let's
Let's hope we have a lot more. We're really excited this morning because we're announcing a new project.
That's right.
It's an alternative government to the current government that we have. As you know, our government has not been representing the needs of the people or considering solutions that the majority of people favor and that would solve our crises. So we've joined with the Green Party candidates, Dr. Jill Stein and Cheri Honkala, to create our new shadow cabinet.
The Green Shadow Cabinet.
Alternative government.
Alternative government.
Yeah.
It's very exciting. Well, you know, you're the Secretary of Health.
That's right.
I'm the Attorney General. And we
Yeah.
have a lot of great people we're associated with. It's an honor to be part of this team. If people go to greenshadowcabinet.us, they can see it.
Yeah, there are over 80 people so far that have joined the cabinet. In my health council, I'm excited to have experts from across the nation in areas such as women's health, health disparities, mental health, many of, environmental health, many of the things that we need to address in this country.
I got some great people in the Justice Council. We formed councils rather than just one cabinet position because there are so many people who want to be involved and so many good people, and I got a great Justice Council.
Absolutely. So without delay,
Yes.
I would like to bring to you the new Vice President of the Alternative Government of the United States of America, Cheri Honkala. For the past 25 years, Cheri has been a leading advocate for poor and homeless in America. She co-founded the Kensington Welfare Rights Union and the Poor People's Economic Human Rights Campaign. She's organized tens of thousands, holding marches, demonstrations, and setting up tent cities. And she ran for Vice President of Green Party. Good morning, Cheri.
Welcome, Cheri.
Good morning. This is a new day.
It is.
A very exciting day.
So what's your thoughts on the Green Party, the Green Shadow Cabinet?
I am absolutely excited. I think that we have the beginning of an amazing cabinet with people that are committed to building something separate to this corporate duopoly that we have out here. And these are the real movers and shakers that are committed to democracy and a different kind of not just country but world for us to live in.
It's an impressive group we all put together.
Yes, it's absolutely exciting. I see nothing but exciting things ahead. I think through a combination of written pieces that we're going to see on a regular basis on our national website. I think we're going to see an increase in the building of organizational grassroots networks, electoral challenges, legal challenges, direct action, and all doing this with independent allies, I think is the exciting piece that we're going to see ahead.
Not only do we have a female duo as president and vice president, we have a female duo leading the foreign affairs, the first Secretary of Defense, retired Commander Leah Bolger, who was the past president of the Veterans for Peace, and the great Colonel Ann Wright, who served for decades both in the Foreign Service and the military as the Secretary of State. Pretty impressive team.
Very impressive.
Yeah, and I think the Secretary of Labor, Rich Monhay, labor leader from Workers Unite, and we have Kalila Collins on the cabinet for the elimination of poverty in this country.
I think that, that's one of the things I like about the way that the cabinet's been set up is when we're talking about issues that are not talked about, like elimination of poverty. You don't ever hear that said by anyone, including President Obama, in the corporate duopoly. We also talk about full employment. Again, that's off the radar for the government, even though it's achievable. So issues that are off the agenda are starting to get back on again because of this cabinet.
Yeah, I mean, other things like, mass incarceration, also dealing with the question of deportation, our attacks on civil liberties, the student debt that exists out there, you name it. There's, issues like this.
Well, you mentioned student debt.
Right?
You mentioned student debt. And what also I like about that is we have on the cabinet a guy who is a student activist, one of the leaders of the National Student Mobilization Movement. So it's not just a bunch of old folks like us.
Well, Cheri and I don't consider ourselves too old.
No.
Well, you're not as old as I am.
But Cheri, maybe we could back up a little bit and tell us kind of what brought you to this point. I mean, you've been working, for 25 years on behalf of people in poverty, people who have lost their homes. Tell us why you feel like this is such an important project that we're involved in.
Well, I'm very excited because after, literally I buried another 8 people, a few of them since this January that I think shouldn't have died in our country. A good friend of mine, Joshua, who went into a diabetic coma. He's in his early 30s, and his daughter was laying on his stomach, and he didn't even know he was a diabetic because he didn't have access to health care in this country.
Wow.
And, so if we look at the health care issue, if we look at loved ones that are, sitting in prison across this country, if you look at the drug war, if you look at our continued military spending, a lack of civil liberties, and just the existence of our planet being at stake right now. I think that, at this time right now in history, I think that we're joining the rest of the world in this fight against austerity. And we know that we're not surviving under this current system or under this current administration. So we have a responsibility to put something else in place. And today, on International Mother Earth Day, I'm proud to say that I'm working with over 80 people that intend to do just that.
Right.
So,
Well, the thing one thing you mentioned when we were working on organizing this cabinet that I think is important to highlight is that people need to see an electoral alternative. This can't just be about putting forward the right positions. People have done that for a long time. But what we're starting to try to show people with this cabinet, I think, I know you talked about this when we were organizing it, is that there is a real alternative. That a lot of very smart, committed people could run this government more effectively than the corporate duopoly, the Democrats and Republicans. And I think that showing that electoral alternative is really, in large part, what this is about.
Yeah, and I think it's going to force all of us to put forward our visions and our ideas of, okay, we're in charge now, so what are the solutions to the various different problems that we're facing in this country? And we're going to show that we are capable of governing, that we are capable of taking back this democracy that all of us have wanted, and at the same time, taking care of our planet and ensuring that basic things like our ability to breathe clean air and have access to water and to, care for each other and each of our communities, that we can actually live out these ideas.
Yeah, I think another aspect of this project that's really important to me is that there are solutions to all the crises that we face, and the majority of people in the United States support these solutions, but the current government and the governments before that are not even allowing them to be discussed. And so I hope that people will see that there are people who believe in those solutions, who are working to put those solutions forth, and that these ideas can get into the debate, that into the public dialogue, so that more people can hear them. I know that, during the health reform process, as you know, pushing in Congress to even consider what the majority of people support in Medicare for all. And Kevin, you've worked for decades on the drug war issue.
And just you mentioned Medicare for all. I mean, and Cheri started off talking about losing 8 colleagues and friends in the last couple of months, and that's part of 100,000 people who die each year in this country because we don't have a good healthcare system.
Right.
I mean, if you had a healthcare system like France or Japan, if we had Medicare for all, those 8 people probably wouldn't have died.
Right.
I mean, it's really that kind of that's the reality of the situation, and it's not just the healthcare system, because as you always say, Margaret, healthcare is tied to having a home, having a job, having a decent food. I mean, those social
a
clean environment, get the toxicity out of the poor neighborhoods. I mean, this is the reality that is facing the United States and not being dealt with, and they can be dealt with. That's what's so critical about all these crises the country faces of homelessness and poverty and joblessness and underemployment and lack of access to health care. These are solvable problems. That's what's so obnoxious about them all.
And I think, to your listeners that are out there, if they can play a role in, helping us break this media blackout, let people know that this new alternative exists, the Green Shadow Cabinet, and help us make this thing go viral. To talk about it in their neighborhoods and on their Facebooks and to their local radio programs.
Mm-hmm.
I had one person on my Facebook page today, Cheri. I had one person on my Facebook page today write me when he heard about this, talking about something we've talked about, which is the idea of local communities setting up their own local community councils and starting to govern themselves. There are problems that are not being dealt with by the local government or the state or federal governments that people can solve. And if we can start to have communities get, take it into their own hands, set up community councils, and in a democratic way, begin to solve these problems. We can solve a lot of problems outside of government, and when we do, people will see it as an alternative to the crummy governments we face.
Yeah, I mean, I had somebody, some folks wanting to set up a green shadow city council.
Exactly, that's great.
One of the small cities in California, and I just think that this thing is going to spiral, because this is what time it is right now in history. It's really time for us to take back our democracy and create the green, just future that all of us deserve.
Absolutely. I mean, just this past week in Portland, Oregon, they were continuing to try to push through, the city council was trying to push through an austerity budget. And fortunately, a number of community groups came together, including labor, and went to that council meeting and just took it over and said, no, we're saying no to these cuts. Here's where you can get the money. They offered a very clear plan for where the city could get the revenue so they wouldn't have to cut these important social programs. And that's the time that we live in. Austerity is just being pushed on us from every corner.
I mean, when Howard Dean's talking about leaving the Democratic Party,
something's going
former
on.
head of the Democratic Party, he's talking about leaving the party. I mean, a lot of Democrats are thinking the same thing, that the party's so off course, that the government's so off course, they're looking for an alternative. And by putting together this kind of group of really top-notch professionals and activists and community organizers, people who really have experience and understand the issues, it's going to show people there is an alternative. We can rule better than the people in power.
It's time for us to, break with these parties that are killing us and step forward and help us be a part of creating something new and something that generations to come will look back and see we played a role in bringing forth democracy in this country and at the same time saving the people and the planet.
Excellent.
Absolutely. Well, Cheri, we are really honored that you and Jill Stein were included us in this project, and we take this responsibility very seriously.
So greenshadowcabinet.us is the website.
And do you have a final comment before we have to go and take our break?
Again, I just want to encourage folks to help us make this thing go viral, really get it out there to all your friends on Facebook and write about it, talk about it, and let's build this new kind of future together. I'm very excited, and happy Earth Day to everybody. Let's take back our democracy and our planet.
Great.
Right.
Happy
Thank
Mother
you.
Earth Day to you, too.
Thanks for joining us. Take care of your cold, too.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Okay, we're going to take this break with a song by Jefferson Airplane called Volunteers
Volunteers.
of America. That's what we are.
If you're caught with an ounce of cocaine, the chances are good you're going to go to jail. If it happens repeatedly, you may go to jail for the rest of your life. But evidently, if you launder nearly $1 billion for drug cartels and violate our international sanctions, your company pays a fine and you go home and sleep in your own bed at night. Every single individual associated with this. And I think that's fundamentally wrong.
You're listening to WEACT Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at WEACT Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
June 27th is National HIV Testing Day.
HIV testing is fast, painless, and often free.
I've been tested for HIV.
I've been tested for HIV. Have you? To find an HIV testing center near you, visit greaterthan.org.
Hi, this is Chris Hedges, and when I'm in Washington, I don't want my news filtered through corporate sponsors. I want to hear the truth, which is why I listen to DC's only independent radio station, WEACT Radio, 1480 AM, WPWC, Washington's progressive working community. WEACT Radio, do something.
Look who's here. How you doing?
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese.
And happy Earth Day. If you didn't join us for the first segment, we're very excited today to announce the launch of the Green Shadow Cabinet. It's an alternative government project that brings together over 80 prominent scientists, physicians, lawyers, community activists, labor activists, all coming together to show what an alternative government of the United States of America would look like.
We just had on Cheri Honkala.
She's our vice president.
Vice president. The website is greenshadowcabinet.us.
That's right. And so today we're going to focus, because it's Earth Day, on ecology, the environment, and how that interrelates with the economy. We're very excited to have with us the Green Shadow Cabinet, political ecology advisor to the president, Christopher Cox. Christopher is a second-year graduate student in political science at Portland State University, where he studies and researches global ecopolitics in the modern framework of green political theory. We know him as Trombone.
Trombone.
Because prior to that,
he plays the people's bugle.
That's right. He had a career as a musician playing jazz and hip-hop. Good morning, Christopher. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, how you doing? Good to see you guys. Good to hear you guys, I guess.
Great. Good to hear you. So I guess, did you want to start off with a question? You look like you're ready.
Well, my first question, I guess, Christopher, to you is: if now that you're an advisor to the president, and from the ecology perspective on Earth Day, what would be the advice you'd give Jill Stein and Cheri Honkala?
Oh well. First off, let me just say, I'm excited as could possibly be just to be a part of it, because I think this is really the way we need to approach things, considering the absolute inhumanity of our governmental system at this point. I think the most important thing that we can do on Earth Day or any other day is to kind of take our heads out of take our heads out of the clouds of future sustainability, and instead talk about what Professor John Barry likes to talk about, which is, the actually existing unsustainability that we live in.
Right.
And I think that's what Earth Day ought to be about. It's not just, celebrating being green or any other kind of posturing. It's really about, we need to educate ourselves about what the ecology really is and how. And when I say ecology, I like to always, if possible, talk about the global ecology, because that nothing that happens here in the United States doesn't have some kind of an effect somewhere else. And so I think that's part of our problem. That's why we're in the pickle that we're in, is we've utilized our economic system to buy our way out of, actually dealing with the effects of how we live here.
So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that Earth Day is not just about reduce, reuse, recycle?
that is a wonderful way to put it, yes.
So maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about what's going on kind of in the global economic discussion and why, the types of things that you're trying to introduce into that discussion that aren't happening.
Well, one of the areas that I ended up getting quite taken by, I was doing some background research for a paper I was writing that was really supposed to be about the sovereignty, which is those of us who study political ecology, that's one of the biggest issues that we ever deal with is sovereignty, because how do you fix a problem that originates in another country, for example, runoff or pollution of a river that flows in past the boundaries of a particular city or a particular state or country they're in, and trying to address ecological destruction without impeding the sovereignty of another country or having your own sovereignty impeded. So there's a lot of challenges in all of that. And the interesting thing was that I expected to write a paper that was more about that issue alone, and what I ended up finding was that what was far more important, and I guess I shouldn't have been surprised, is the concentration of capital in the world. And I was able to figure out with an extremely minimal amount of reading, I was able to figure out that there more or less is an oligopoly of all of the available capital on the entire planet. I mean, it's literally owned by 20-plus, trans-territorial mega corporations. That's a problem. I mean, if that
is as low as 20-plus.
Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, as early, there's a researcher named Janet Lowe who wrote a book back in. This was a long time ago. This was back in 1996. She was asserting that there was, I believe, she said 26 of these
a lot of them are big finance, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's the other piece of the puzzle and boy is it a puzzle, let me tell you. Trying to get your hands around this concept of the financialization of global capital, and I'm still I'm studying it all the time, trying to figure out how it works, trying to figure out, how can you possibly follow it, and the only thing that I can extrapolate at this point is there's obviously only less owners of that capital now in the year 2013. So it's not going up. I mean, in other words, the capital's not being more equitably distributed. Let's just put it that way.
Right. So what is the effect of that concentrated capital on the planet Earth, on the environment?
And that is the operative question. And what we do know, as what any actual scientific ecologists could even tell you, but more precisely, those of us who deal with the crossover into the economic question, is that I like to say it this way, the only reason that we live the way that we live in the United States is not only at the expense of the global ecosystem itself, it's at the expense primarily of the ecosystems of what we like to refer to as the global south. And so essentially what's happening is the global north, and you can pretty much say, we can call that the triad, the United States, European Union, and Japan, increasingly China, obviously. Australia is another country that's not too far behind us in a lot of ways. These countries subsist the way that we subsist, with this really high standard of living where we can all drive our own cars and all these different kinds of things, only because we're dragging the resources out of the poorer countries. And a lot of times these resources are not even just your normal natural resources, these are human resources as well, labor, all of these things, all connected to the ecosystem.
So what should a country like the United States be doing?
That's that's one of those questions that we, us and academics, we like to avoid those "what ought to be done" questions, because they're just so complex.
Well, you're now you're an advisor to the president.
Yeah.
What do you tell him?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing is what we're actually doing in the Green Shadow Cabinet. We need to demonstrate. I think it's a two-level issue. The first level being we got to understand. There are a few general lessons that we need to understand, not just as voters, but not just as citizens, but as members of humanity. We need to actually understand that, first and foremost, the luxury of slow incremental change, which the United States is so famous for, that's over. We actually do not have the time. I mean, and I literally mean that. We do not have the time to sit around and dawdle with these quote-unquote democratic approaches, where we are, where it takes 6 months to get an issue just on the agenda of any particular political leader, much less have that issue ever actually be taken seriously and actually brought to the people so that the people can address their opinion. We saw this happen with the gun legislation. It's another 90% issue, I like to call them, where there's a lot of these issues, and a lot of them are environmental in scope. And so that's the first step is just realizing that we don't have this luxury of slow incremental change that we are all told we have every day, particularly here in the United States. The other thing is that the oligopoly of all of this, let's just call it the global concentration of wealth in the hands of the world's 1%, which is essentially what's going on. This is not a United States issue. This is a humanity level problem. And that we in the United States have not only the obligation, but I believe actually the real propensity and possibility, and this is where I become more optimistic, is that we do have the possibility of actually addressing these issues at the humanity level and taking them out of this kind of nation-state centric way of looking at our global economic crises. And there are, I say crises because there's literally hundreds of crises going on at the same time. This is a very, very complex issue, and then I'll add a third piece, which is there's the scientific piece, and we need to start paying attention to our climate scientists. It's not a joke. It's not some kind of it's not a debate for debate's sake, which it often looks like. This is literally, scientists are actually quitting their posts. I mean, look at what James Hansen did. They're quitting cushy jobs, at the top of the rung, so that they can fight global warming more directly,
Yeah.
So that's what I think is the three pieces of the puzzle. That's what we need to do, and I think the Shadow Cabinet is a great move in that direction, because we're not relying on the same old people for the same old information, and we're not, like Cheri said, we're showing that there is an alternative. This is what it could look like if you actually had people in the post that cared about what they were doing
and had the expertise about what needs to be done. So we have to take a short break, and then we hope we can come back and talk more about your work on finite resources.
Yeah, I want to ask you about what kind of political economy would be consistent with an ecological economy when we come back.
Right. So we're going to go into this break with a song by Ryan Harvey on global economy.
Oh, Ryan Harvey, one of my favorite Baltimore guys.
Yes, he is.
1 cup of coffee, $1.50. Guy who picked the coffee didn't get 3. Stuck in the belly of an industry that doesn't care about people. Working on the hills on stolen land, picking at the earth with a scuffed bare hand, sweating for the profits of some rich man that doesn't care about people.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Open Studio Tour is a premier arts event in the Gateway Arts District, showcasing more than 140 artists. Open Studio Tour occurs Saturday, May 11th from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. in the Prince George's County Gateway Arts District. Attendees are able to enjoy more than 17 venues, 70 studios, and over 140 artists will be opening their studio doors. This is home to the most innovative and exciting art scenes in the D.C. metro area. The Gateway Arts District brings together professional artists representing almost every visual arts medium. This year's tour features music and live performances and an opening exhibition at the 39th Street Gallery. This event is free and open to the public. For more information, please visit gatewayopenstudios.org. That's gatewayopenstudios.org. This event is funded in part by Maryland Park and Planning and sponsored by Gateway CDC, LandX Companies, and Anacostia Trails. We hope to see you there.
This is Kimon Freeman, host of Speak Easy and co-founder of We Act Radio. Suicide is a very serious problem in today's challenging world, whether with our troops abroad or with everyday citizens within our own society. Before you take your life into your own hands, tie a knot at the end of your rope and call the suicide hotline toll-free at 1-855-320-LIFE. That's 1-855-320-LIFE. It may just be the most important call you ever make. You talk, we listen, and together we survive.
It's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going.
I speak from Pennsylvania's death row.
A bright, shiny, highly mechanized hell.
Mumia Abu-Jamal is one of the lost souls of the revolution.
And they're trying to figure out how to shut him down entirely.
They have moved heaven and earth to stop his voice being heard in the United States.
When you talk about groups that are maligned and slurred as terrorists in the major media, they're really small fry. They're retail terrorists. Wholesale terrorists are the United States government.
The whole problem is really the blacks. The key is to devise a system that recognizes this while not appearing to it.
On the move, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Hi, I'm Tom Morello. Some call me the Night Watchman. In the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal is at a crucial stage. Please go to freemumia.com to find out more information about how you can help Mumia Abu-Jamal and other political prisoners. Night Watchman out.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
One diamond ring, a few grand. Kid who mined the diamonds lost his hand. As a message from the soldiers who run the land that are funded by diamond corporations. Wealth derived through poverty from the lingering cuts of slavery in the form of an export economy controlled by diamond corporations.
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese.
And we wish you a happy Mother Earth Day today. And we're excited that today is the launch of an alternative government program, if you're just joining us, called the Green Shadow Cabinet. It's an alternative government to the one that we currently have, one now that represents the interests of the people and the planet. And we have with us Christopher Cox, who is the political ecology advisor to the president. So, Christopher, you write about the concept of finite resources, and right now we have a very extractive economy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. Well, the most important operative point is the way you put it, which is that we have an extractive economy, and what that means is that it's fairly self-explanatory. In order for to keep utilizing gas as the main source of fuel for our vehicles, to keep using natural gas to use for heat, in areas where we could clearly go with another source. We can go on and on like this. Coal,
uranium,
the metals for our computers.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's almost we could spend 5 shows talking about that. And the reality is, the only reason, I would contest the only reason that we are still doing this in the year 2013 is simply because we haven't yet realized that Homo economicus is long dead. And
what's
and
long
I always
dead?
like to
Homo economicus. Maybe you could explain that.
What was Homo economicus?
Yeah. There's an old saying, that originates with neoliberal economics, or what some people say was neoclassical economics. That Homo economicus, which means rational economic man, is the way that economists like to think about it. And the central idea is the typical free market capitalist utopia, which is that I make economic choices according to a rationalized set of questions I give myself every time I buy something. So in other words, when I buy the candy bar, I'm going through my head, okay, this candy bar is 75 cents, the one next to it is 60 cents. I'm going to go with the one that's a 60 cents. I don't care if it tastes better or not. And it's ultimately decisions are made because of the run to the bottom line. It's, which some people have called the tyranny of the bottom line. And I like to say, let's just get rid of Homo economicus. He's been dead a long time. We all know that we don't make economic decisions purely out of what's cheaper and what's not. And even if we did, we need to explore the ethical implications of those decisions. And that's what we do in political economy. That's the difference between political economy and so-called economics. Economics is the scientification, the mathematization, if you will, of deeply social, psychological, and interrelative issues among humans. And that's what the original study of economics was, and it was always called political economics. It was never separated. That only happened in the roughly around the 50s, right, when we suddenly, because what happened was everybody started realizing if we just take the ethics out of it, then we've got our own separatized science there. And we can kick out all those progressives, and
what we're doing, Christopher,
What
we're still doing, Christopher, in policy is taking the ethics out of it. I'm thinking of the Trans-Pacific. Exactly. I'm thinking of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, for example. They have these trade tribunals that they're setting up that put profits over everything. Right. And so, if you want to have a system where the corporation can sue because of lost profits, why not a system where people can sue because of destruction of the environment? Right. Why is profits what you can sue
family,
about?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a perfect example of under traditional economics, something like the tar sands that's destroying an area the size of New York State in Canada. If it's making money, that's a positive.
Same with taking off the mountaintops of the Shenandoah Valley.
Right.
Yeah, there's virtually zero, and it's important to point that out. That's a wonderful example because that is literally one of those situations where there is no gray area. They are blowing the tops off those mountains for one reason only. It is cheaper to mine that way.
That's right.
That's it. There's
and in the process,
and for all of eternity, those mountains no longer have mountaintops. Exactly. And we've done that to hundreds of mountains up and down the Appalachian Mountains.
Right. These are what Chris Hedges refers to as the sacrifice zones. And I think he's got a real point there. That's the beginning. We're now seeing what we've been doing to the rest of the world for hundreds of years at this point. And that's what we're seeing is that we're actually now having those sacrifice zones in our own country.
That's right.
And it starts with West Virginia and places like that. But believe me, pretty soon it's going to be everywhere. If there's oil to be gotten, if there's gas to be siphoned out, if there's any kind of chemicals we need that happen to be under the ground, they're going to get to it unless we the people actually stand up and say, actually, we care where we get our energy. We actually care what the implications are.
Well, you can
know
see
that if we just organize things differently, it would still be affordable.
That's right. You can see that getting to the extreme nature with this whole tar sands issue, not only with the size of a New York State area being torn apart in Canada and just destroyed,
right,
but just going up and down the middle of the United States agricultural belt, going over sources of fresh water that provide for virtually all of our agriculture, with the risk of a pipeline spill that could destroy that water source. It's just
not only that, there's a dust bowl developing. I mean, no one's really wants to talk about it. But I was on a panel just recently at a conference, and one of the panelists was Zev Trachtenberg, who's a genius political theorist who teaches at University of Oklahoma, and he was. We had a long conversation about how in Oklahoma City and all the farming regions around there, that it's just an understood fact of life that they're in a drought.
Right. A long-term
drought. The drought doesn't stop. It's every year. I mean, they just plan on it at this point.
And that's true in Asia. That's true in Australia.
The Dust Bowl.
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes before our next break, and then our third guest is going to join us. Did you want to talk a little bit about what kind of political economy?
Yeah. What would be a political economy that's consistent with the ecological realities we face?
Well, I think in typical fashion, when we're dealing with, like I said, humanity level issues, the type of political economy that we need one that's supple. And I like to say has travel. And what that means is that it needs to be a form of economic interaction among humans that allows for flexibility, so that certain situations are going to require different solutions from different areas.
Right.
For example, I don't think we can just say straight up, we need a socialist answer, or we need to take more of a Marxist approach, or we need a heterodox economic, whatever, all these different things. It's kind of, the most important thing is we need to look at ownership, and we need to look at the distribution of that wealth within an organization. And I think Gar Alperovitz does amazing work in that area. And looking at the concept of a more collective economy, okay, but more in the framework of I'm losing the word now, but Alvarado Street Bakery. Trying to think
cooperative.
Co-op, yeah, right. Thank you. So more of a cooperative form of economy. I really think that's the way forward. And I think if there's a lot of political economists that if they were alive today, I think that's what they'd be calling for.
Well, we have two people in the Green Shadow Cabinet, Gar Alperovitz, who you mentioned, and Richard Wolff, who are probably the two of the leading activists.
Both amazing.
Economists advocating for workers getting control through cooperatives. So I think that is a step. I think what you're really describing, what I hear, is economic democracy. I mean, it's
absolutely.
In
fact, that term democratization of capital is something that's been floating around in my head.
Right.
I think that's what we need to strive for.
And that the bottom line is not just profit, but it's like Maryland is starting to use a new measurement, and it's instead of the state GDP, it's the genuine progress indicator, which takes into account how the quality of life is. So.
That's what I like about the evergreen model that Gar Alperovitz puts forward. The evergreen cooperatives. It's not just about building a cooperative. It's about building a community. Because then you're not just looking at people getting work and people making wealth. You're looking at building the community. And so when you come across something like an environmental toxicity issue, even if you can profit from it, it's not good for the community. So it's that combination of people having decent jobs and building wealth and sharing wealth with building the community in a healthy and safer way. And that's on a local level and a national and on a global level.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I remember as a kid, when I first started seeing the stickers of, think globally, act locally, and I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, it often seems like now we have the think globally side down, and in some, and it's funny how
at least as far as trade.
Areas, in some areas it's like they've got the act locally, but they don't have the think globally. You know, and then in other areas it's. The think globally is all over the place, but the acting local is just nowhere on the map. You know, and so it's very interesting that we kind of have to bring that back and really fine tune that into whatever our political economy is going to look like.
Right. Well, that's a great way to go into our next segment, but we need to take a short break, and we're going to do this with the song by.
Christopher's going to stay for the final.
That's right.
Because I want him to hear our final song.
Oh, absolutely. This is a song that we're going to play right now by Woody Guthrie called A Better World A-Comin'.
There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you see, see. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you see. When we'll all be union and we'll all be free. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you see.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Valero Oil of Texas, it's time to get a clue. Your oil thing is over, quit belching CO2. That oil is just too yucky and the pipeline risk too high. Leave the tar sands in Alberta and kiss fossil fuel goodbye.
Let me tell you who to blame. Blame the boy lying at your feet, his body oozing life through the hole in his stomach where the bullet tore him apart. Blame him for challenging you, for not looking away and for not backing down when you pulled out the gun. Blame your mother for bringing you into this world when she was but a kid herself and for dragging you up, not bringing you up. Blame society for not giving you hope. Blame your father for not being there, the man who looked after himself instead of looking after you. Blame the gun in your hand for making you a target, for making you more likely to be picked on. Blame the dead boy, blame your mother, blame society, blame your father, blame the gun, blame anyone but yourself for not being strong enough to put down the gun, to break the cycle.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
George Dr. Funkenstein Clinton saying, you're listening to We Act Radio. They do the dog, y'all.
There's a better world a-comin', and don't you know, no. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you know. I'm a union man in a union war. It's a union world I'm fighting for. There's a better world that's a-comin', don't you know.
You're listening to Clearing the Fog, speaking truth to expose the forces of greed with Margaret Flowers.
And Kevin Zeese, and this is We Act Radio.
Right. We wish you a happy Earth Day, and We Act Radio is celebrating Earth Day today with the Anacostia High School volunteers who are building a community garden in our backyard.
It's a big garden. I hope they know what they're taking on here. That's a big challenge.
And some of them have joined us today in the audience. But if you're just joining us, we're talking today on Mother Earth Day about the launch of the new alternative government, the Green Shadow Cabinet. And we've been speaking with Christopher Cox, who's the political ecology advisor to the president, and now we're joined by Sean Sweeney, who serves as climate change advisor to the president. He's the director and founder of the Global Labor Institute at Cornell School of Industrial and Labor Relations in New York City. He's been involved with he created the first North American Labor Assembly on climate crisis, and has been doing work on bringing the discussion around economic alternatives, environmental sustainability, and climate protection. Thank you for joining us, Sean.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, we're very excited that you're part of this alternative government project. The number of people on it have just been, amazing.
It's a great group of
amazing people.
Yeah. So we love your work about bringing labor and climate together. So how would you be advising the president and vice president on those issues? What would be the top advice you'd give them?
Oh, this is an easy one.
I try to make the first one easy.
First of all, the labor community is all over the map on these issues right now. They really got immersed in the sort of the green jobs narrative, and anticipated that an election of a Democrat, whether it be Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama back in 2008, would open up a major period of job creation. And there was a lot of money, by U.S. standards, devoted through the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, the Obama stimulus package, towards green investments. But it coincided, as you all know, with a big recession, and so whatever good stuff came out of that was offset by some really serious increase in unemployment and loss of manufacturing in particular. So as a result, a lot of unions have gone for any job they can get, and that's why you get the Keystone support for Keystone. Right. So what should the president do? Well, first of all, the potential is there and the need is for a public works program, and with using sort of New Deal type direct hire mechanisms to get people to work not just for socially necessary things, but also environmentally necessary things, and that would be emissions reductions and other forms of environmental benefits. So it's a no-brainer. If he had a major jobs program, you wouldn't have the laborers' union dancing next to the TransCanada Corporation to get approval of a pipeline for some temporary jobs.
Right.
We would have a better option.
So setting a kind of a full employment agenda based on public works, with a particular emphasis on energy and the environment.
I would say so. Obviously, none of these things are as easy as I've just described them. You're dealing with states, but a job of a president is to show leadership on the issue.
Right.
It's Orwellian the way in the State of the Union address, the president can refer to whatever it was, 200 years of oil and gas, and then in the next breath talk about climate change and the responsibility to our children, our grandchildren. Right. To me, it's Orwellian, and there's not enough people in public discourse drawing attention to the wholly contradictory aspect of that.
Yeah, that's really interesting thing, that contradiction that stands out. It just shows that rather than leadership, that just leads to confusion.
Right. So in terms of getting there, I'm wondering, you've been doing a lot of work with the international labor community to bring these discussions around sustainability and climate change. How has that been received? How is labor responding to that?
Well, labor follows labor looks in. There's two ways of looking at this. There's the global conversation in the labor movement, which is generally very strong behind a binding global agreement under the auspices of the United Nations. That's not true of the U.S. labor movement. They take the lead of the State Department. The State Department has this view that it should be a voluntary pledge and review system, which means basically there's going to be no agreement if you follow that line. That was the Copenhagen Accord. So first of all, what a president should do here is to engage the UN and say, the United States will lead the next develop the architecture for a new agreement. That would be very important. Mm-hmm. It has to be based on the science, and the president, a president who was truly committed to sustainable economy and ecology, would make that a top priority. We didn't see that in the case of the existing president, of course. Now, so the labor movement follows the lead of their various governments. They often don't act independently of those governments so much. So the European unions go along with the European Union. And they've been pretty progressive on it. And it's true with a lot of the unions. But because most regions, most countries in the global south at least pay some lip service to the idea of a binding agreement. That's where the unions are, but they're not so in the U.S., unfortunately, at the moment. Some are, but most aren't.
Well, that sounds very consistent with, also on the phone with us is Christopher Cox, who's the ecology advisor of the president. Christopher, any quick responses or comments on Sean's analysis?
No, it sounded pretty bang on to me, and I think he touched on a really important point, which is this kind of volunteerist, rhetoric that the United States is more or less single-handedly purported all over the world. That's one of those slow incremental changes that I was talking about. That's got to go. This whole voluntary implication, that's got to be. People need to take charge of that.
And you've been writing about how nation states actually serve the interests of the corporations.
Well, that's the problem.
Absolutely.
I think that's the problem. I think with both Sean's and Christopher's recommendations is that currently we have a government that's bought out by the corporate interests. Now, one thing we talked about, Sean, with Christopher before you came on was the importance of worker cooperatives. Now, you've been involved in bringing the Mondragon community, which is the world's largest cooperative network, in with U.S. Steel. Can you tell us about that and how that's going? Did we lose Sean?
I'm here, but I'm not actually involved in that project.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were.
Okay.
No, actually, I thought you were aiming that one at Chris. I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay. I have down that you worked with the steelworkers, and that was to organize the Climate Crisis Assembly.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, but if you could talk a little bit about when you bring in a discussion of economic alternatives, what types of economic alternatives do you see as moving us forward?
Well, there's first of all, I think one of the things we have to do is get out of the. Obviously, sometimes markets are important. Markets go back thousands of years. We're not going to get rid of markets. But when we're talking about an ecological and an economic crisis that's this severe, then obviously, governments can play a role as an employer. They do so in the case of the Pentagon and the military, which I think is one of the largest employers in the U.S. after Walmart. So what I think we need to do is obviously government leadership is important, government agencies are important, but not in the old way of the top-down style.
Right.
There's definitely enormous amounts of space for community-based organizations, for unions even, to be involved. They do a lot of the biggest training of workers. They're the biggest trainer of workers than any other entity in the U.S. except the federal government. So there's training, there's involvement. The government needs to be an enabler of local control and local power. Now that's, again, we don't want to make too much of an obsession of that because local decisions are not always the right decisions. If we're talking about addressing a climate crisis, you need full spectrum cooperation.
Right.
And local is not only the only way to do it, So, but co-ops, I think, are hugely important. We're trying to build a new economy on new principles. And the sort of solidarity economy, the sharing economy. I'm not an expert in it, but to the extent that I follow it, I think it shows a glimpse of what can be accomplished, but it won't become generalized without, banks and energy corporations being under public control and democratic ownership. And that sounds very socialistic, but I think it's absolutely necessary if we're going to do what we need to do within the time frame that it needs to be done, because there is obviously a race against time here.
So it's an interesting mix you put forward. I like it a lot, this kind of leadership from the president that puts forward a vision and an agenda and need for rapid change, but then really the leadership at the local level as well that's enabled by the government. I like that mix.
I think it's a model where it's really a set the people free model, but not to the point where, in a sort of a ultra libertarian way, where it's all about you do what you want. Obviously, there's a big sense of real re-education process that needs to go on around, about environmental stewardship, about civic responsibility, about caring for each other. All of this is, I think, needs to be articulated in ways that actually are backed up by real actions.
And that's consistent with the work that we do. As our listeners know, we have a project called itsourEconomy.us where we have resources about how to build democratic economic institutions. Sean, we really appreciate you joining us today. Is there somewhere where our listeners can follow your work?
No. I don't.
The Green Shadow Cabinet.
There we go. Yes, greenshadowcabinet.us.
Yeah, I'm not really that prolific kind of person who's putting out stuff every week, but I'm happy to be involved with this process and, certainly support independent political action. The Green Party is a great, program. It's under discussion, and I'd like to continue to be part of it. But it's hugely important what's going on to have that alternative vision being developed in a serious way.
Christopher, any last comments from you?
No, I think wonderful comments on the program so far. Great work, guys.
Well, thank you for joining us. And so we're going to go out with a song by Trombone, Christopher Cox, in Junkyard Empire. And it's what we close with every week. It's the song called We Want. The people organize.
Can build the kind of future
we want. This is Margaret Flowers.
And I'm Kevin Zeese. Join us every Monday morning at 11 a.m. for Clearing the Fog.
Speaking truth to expose the forces of greed.
Start the week with your eyes open.
The fog.
The forces of greed that spin news stories for the benefit of the 1%.
Each week we feature guests who are working to expose these truths and offer real solutions to the current crises we face.
Knowledge is power, and with knowledge you will be empowered to act, to shift the power to the people.
Monday mornings at 11 a.m. on weactradio.com or 1480 a.m.
Hi, I'm Tom Morello. Some call me the Night Watchman. In the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal at a crucial stage, please go to freemumia.com to find out more information about how you can help Mumia Abu-Jamal and other political prisoners. Night Watchman out.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
These funds and every other investor we have to get a good return on their investment. Investment in infrastructure gives you a good return. Investment in building retrofits gets you a guaranteed return. They will tell you from the get-go how much will be saved, how long it will take to recover the investment, then how long it will take to pay the return. Everybody gets their money back. Everybody saves money who owns a building. The environment is improved, and the AFL-CIO, in this case, has set an example of being the best business people in America, and I hope a lot of people will follow their lead. Thank you very much.
Richard Trumka told the rally participants how the investment program was initiated.
President Clinton and I talked about what we could do to create jobs and to take on the challenge of climate change, and how working people could step up and invest where banks and Wall Street had failed. President Clinton and the AFL-CIO had been working on parallel tracks toward the same goal for years. But after that night, we brought our efforts together and we've made some great strides. In 2011, the labor movement committed as part of the Clinton Global Initiative to help facilitate $20 million in investment in energy-efficient retrofits to stoke the market for commercial and industrial energy retrofits. And since then, the AFL-CIO Housing Investment Trust alone has invested